The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the Nova Society are those of our guests and panel members and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any institution any member of the Nova Society is associated with. The material information presented on the Nova Society is for general information purposes only. Reproduction or dissemination for the purpose other than education is prohibited without express written consent of the Nova Society. We'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society. Today we're going to have a very serious conversation with our panel regarding the recent Alabama Supreme Court decision about embryos. What will be the impact of that decision on women, and what will be the impact on the IVF industry in the United States? This is a very serious conversation as we look at the implications of what possible theocratic thinking has for a society. So let's listen in. All right, so another thing that came out in the news from the state of Alabama, Supreme Court is going to, now of course everybody knows about IVF, in vitro fertilization, very, very popular for those that wish to have children. The state Supreme Court basically said that that a frozen embryo is a child, and therefore, if you were to destroy one, you could be held legally accountable for that. And even Republicans are running away from that. And we're all parents. So just thinking about that.
But somebody who's going through IVF is going through a very significant financial and emotional process. They're not going to get IVF and then get an abortion unless there's like a significant medical need, but they would have been pre-screened for medical need, that it would be a small percent major, like life-threatening emergency. But the IVF process, you are being handheld through a significant medical. I mean, the people I know who've gone through IVF, they've had years of having to get their diet under control, or hormone treatment, and then not to mention the failed attempts before they actually get the viable result. And it's like, whenever I hear these kinds of laws coming out of the various states, what I'm hearing is a blatant disregard of science, but also a complete, failure to understand what, pregnancy actually does to a woman and her body and her mental state, that they're like, oh, well, we're saying no abortion, so let's make sure every possible option is, accounted for. But it's like, the women who are going through IVF are not going to get an abortion. They have made the commitment. These are people who genuinely want to be parents. So it's one of those things, this Alabama thing is one of those things where I'm like, clearly not enough women are at the table as the state is trying to make laws. And yet again, the conservative lawmakers are looking incredibly stupid about the entire experience of women.
Well, and this isn't the lawmakers. This is the Alabama Supreme Court ruled earlier this month. Frozen embryos are children, and those who destroy them can be held liable for wrongful death.
We were talking earlier about the South Carolina primary. Did you see what Nikki Haley said about this?
I did not.
She said in an interview on Wednesday, embryos to me are babies. When you're talking about an embryo, you're talking about, to me, that's a life. That is sick. That is sick stuff. An embryo is a single cell. An embryo, you can't freeze a baby the way you can freeze an embryo. And there's a good reason for that. Embryos aren't alive. And this is, so they went after the fetus, now they're going after the embryo. This is a crazy escalation of insanity, and it's all based on religion, not law. I mean, that somebody read a little bit of the Supreme Court decision on that,
Yeah.
And there's almost nothing in there about the law. It's all about God did this and God wanted that, and it's just beyond the pale where this country is heading if we allow these people to continue to do what they want so desperately to do.
Yeah, and I think that even the Republicans, just by the report, they saw how toxic this whole idea is. I mean, they truly saw. I mean, you could take it to a point, and as we were talking earlier about, this is the type of legislation. This is the type of decisions being made that will bring out young people.
Mm-hmm.
It will bring young people to the polls, and they will vote you down, especially when it becomes this, this religious based. And the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Alabama was on TV, and if you listen to the man talk, he does not sound like a judge. He sounds like, in fact, he even said, none of this has anything to do with the law. This has to do with God. You're the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, for God's sakes, of a state. I mean, and this is, and again, I've said before, every once in a while I sit with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court here of South Carolina, Justice Beatty, who is a brilliant jurist, was a community activist. He's about to retire this year. I don't think he'd ever say anything like that. To him, there was a difference between when I was a minister and when I'm a lawyer or when I'm a judge. There's a dividing line there. The law should matter. The law should matter. So I would say the Chief Justice of Alabama. Okay, so how much can I get for my daughter? Obviously, because I could sell her into slavery. How much? What's a good price for her? Because God says in the Bible that it's okay. Please explain to me where we take this idea of religious freedom, and we've created into almost a doctrine of the United States where embryos, as Scott said, single cells are considered children. And if you were to damage one, you could be held legally liable for wrongful death.
Some numbskull down in Alabama is going to freeze their kid to prove that it can be done. That's going to happen.
Well,
they're going to take a baby. They're going to take a baby and put it in a freezer and say, okay, well, we can get this kid back after that.
Yeah. Yeah. Brooke, you look like flabbergasted over there.
No, I know. I saw that, and I saw that Nikki Haley had first she said, "Oh, this is a child," and then she said something different, and then she was back to, "Oh, this is a child," and so she had three different responses, and I don't remember what the second one was, but she reversed herself, and then she was back to, "No, this embryo is precious, and this is a baby to me," or whatever it was she said the first time. And everybody's waiting for Donald Trump to say something so that they know what they're supposed to say. And he hasn't said anything. It's just flabbergasting to me.
While we're waiting for Trump to say whatever nonsense, he's going to say, I just wanted to call out what the senator from Alabama said about that. Tommy Tuberville.
Oh, gosh. That was a painful interview.
That was really brutal. I mean, you talk about somebody who is just cognitively disabled. This guy must be that. So first he says, yeah, I'm all for it. We need to have more children. We need to have more kids. We need to have more opportunities. This was the right thing to do. And then they said, well, this is going to negatively affect people who are trying to have babies. And he said, well, that's another conversation. The big thing is now you got to protect the situation and try to work it out to where it's best for everybody. I mean, that's what the whole abortion issue is really about. And then they said, well, no, this is like, they're suspending the services to provide these couples with frozen embryos so they could try to have children. And he goes, wow, that's a tough one. Really is. It's a hard one. I'll have to look at what they're agreeing to and not agreeing to. I haven't seen that, and thinks it would be unfortunate if people were denied that opportunity. it's just, like the not
That's
very smartest people in the world are ending up in offices, and they had like a real serious brilliant jurist, prosecutor as a senator, and they voted him out and they voted this guy in. And it
Yeah.
almost
That's
makes you want to
amazing.
say, hey, whatever happens to you happens to you.
Well, and all the crazies have kind of jumped in on this. Nancy Mace of South Carolina. Her comment is
Oh,
we
yeah.
should do everything we can to protect the IVF for women everywhere. So she's against it. Matt Gaetz, I believe the Alabama law needs to change because the Republican Party cannot be the party against family formation. Yeah.
what?
There you go. There you go.
He's just
Well-
interested in them because they're so young.
Well, that's probably it. Yeah.
Well,
Oh
and
my
it's
God.
probably also statistically realistic that a lot of those politicians' wives also had IVF.
Oh, absolutely.
So
I mean, it's hugely popular now, and it for many couples, it truly is that want to have children. It's a necessity, and I could see where IVF centers in Alabama, they're frightened now. What could possibly happen?
I mean, the worst, I guess, trying to think through like creatively, trying to make sense of this, say somebody, screws up one day and drops a petri dish and kills 15 embryos. I guess that would suck. Now they would be convicted as a murderer, but again, this is still, something that someone who doesn't understand the science behind. Well, okay, let me just stop. Someone who doesn't understand science.
There you go. Yeah.
Does Alabama
Science
have the
deniers.
death penalty? I mean, what are they going to do? Put this person on trial and convict them?
Well, they have the worst
and...
death penalty, right? They're the ones who give
Oh,
you the
yeah,
bends.
Yeah.
Right? They introduce nitrogen gas into the body and gives them the bends, which is incredibly painful and
That's
slow
right.
death.
But okay, so Nick Lyotta, who is from New York, he's a Republican, and he is a Republican in a Biden district that Biden had won. His comment was blue states went too far in allowing extreme third trimester abortions, and a red state potentially preventing families from easy access, life-changing fertility treatments goes too far as well. So is this an answer to both sides kind of going too far in two different directions?
No.
No.
I was not
equivalent.
aware that there were any third trimester abortions permitted.
Well, that there are some instances. I can't speak as much to it because I'm Roman Catholic, and now I can say, yeah, it's Priscilla like what?
No, I was going to say I thought you couldn't speak to it because you've never had babies, but
Oh, no, I had a bunch of those. No, those we had. No. We were a good Catholic family in that way. But I mean, again, I was always the one to say, for my family, it was never an option. That's one of the very few things out of Catholicism that I still hold to. However, it's not my right to tell you what you have to do.
mhm.
If you think that that's fine, that's perfectly, again, it is none of my business. I will support you in that. And, if God is real, he'll sort it out in the end, supposedly. Or she.
Or they.
Or they, whoever. Somebody will. Whoever it is will sort it out. But, I mean, is this kind of like...
It's people being stupid. Third
Okay.
trimester abortions are only ever a thing because something went wrong
Really
with the
wrong.
pregnancy.
Yeah.
Correct.
I would say drastically.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you don't get to the point where you're in your third trimester and you're like, oh, I changed my mind. I don't want to have a baby anymore.
No.
You would have already had that conversation with yourself. It's, something happened where, baby dies, mom gets some sort of like catastrophic illness. I mean, and it's not necessarily even so much, well, why can't you do like an emergency C-section? Well, people do, but sometimes that baby still dies. And so like it becomes that, does that fall under abortion because you were forcibly removing the baby who wasn't viable or at term? Well, yeah, by definition, but again, it's a reflection of a stupid understanding of science and not, again, understanding the experience of pregnancy.
Right. And I think you make a very good point there. Abortions that they're trying to eliminate are those abortions which are by choice, only by choice. There's no other reason than we don't want to have this child. When you get to, actually, I would say mid-second, from what I remember, and keeping in mind that my youngest is 35, so it's been a while since I remembered when pregnancy was around. But from the mid-second trimester on, it's only medical necessity. Something catastrophically goes wrong. Eclampsia, the mother is going to die. And let's face it, if the mother dies, the child dies too.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in the second trimester, you're not, you can't go in there and just take it. It just doesn't work that way. And if you do, all right, so here's my comment. So if you do go in and you take the baby at, say, 22 weeks, is there a possibility the child could live? Yes, there is. Medical science is amazing. Probably you've got a 20% chance, but you've got a chance. All right, great. If the child dies, if the child is allowed to die, or if the child dies, according to this, if an embryo is a child and is allowed to die, and what would be the law for somebody for a child that's 22 weeks old and they're allowed to die? Now, does that kind of carry over?
Well, it carries over, but it probably shouldn't because they are two fundamentally different situations. I mean, a lot of these states who are saying, destruction of an embryo counts as abortion and, criminal, they're the same people who are also criminalizing miscarriages as if someone is choosing to do this, which, again, it's that Mark, you mentioned the choice thing. There are, they're trying to target in a very broad way what is realistically a small percentage of women who are doing legal abortions for whatever decision they're putting into that.
Right.
This morning, I think I heard, I hope this is not true. I hope I was dreaming this because it doesn't sound like anything that should ever happen in America. That in the state of Ohio, police actually went into a woman's house and looked in her toilet to see how large the miscarriage that she had was, and whether she could be held legally responsible for the death of a child.
Yes, that would not surprise me. I did not see that, but that happened the last time with a woman who was arrested, and I think she was pardoned. But that my grandmother had either 4 or 6 miscarriages between my mother and my aunt, and most of them happened when she was using the bathroom, and she would discover that she'd had a miscarriage.
Now,
there's something.
Was this in Illinois, Scott?
Huh?
I thought I heard Ohio.
Ohio.
I'm not looking it up. I'm not even sure I really heard it because of what my reaction to it was the police did that, and it just seems to be like so anti-American. And
oh no,
but the police someone issued a warrant for that. I mean, that's kind of like
somebody's gonna have to look it up.
I'm looking. I'm all right. I couldn't help it. I did look it up.
Okay.
Oh gosh. All right. So this is not the first time.
No.
Ohio woman back in 2023, in December of 2023, Ohio woman's miscarriage will go before a grand jury.
Mm-hmm.
Another one, this woman named Brittany Watts, Ohio woman charged with abusing a corpse.
Yep.
From a miscarriage. December 22nd, a black woman in Ohio charged after miscarrying in her bathroom. Now, this is the one I think.
That's the one I was talking about.
I think this is the one that Scott's talking about, which is from this year. Gosh, there's so many of them. It's hard to, of course, and wouldn't you know, when you look it up, you get a whole bunch of toilet memes. She's like it's really sick. It looks like this most recent one, and they're actually going to go with abusing a corpse.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
what are you supposed to do with it? Pick it out by she did not know what to do with it. You know, I mean, you're supposed to pull the remains of your own baby out. I mean, you've just had a miscarriage, which is not a pleasant experience. And she'd already been in the hospital, this young woman from 2023, several times, and no one had helped her. And then she had a miscarriage. And she didn't know what to do with it.
And you know, there's another state, I think, or maybe more than one state. It might be Texas, maybe some others, where a woman can't leave the state to have an abortion in an abortion state.
Correct.
So that presumably they're going to send state troopers out to stop cars on the highway and look inside to see if there's a pregnant woman in there who's trying to leave the state and arrest her before she can. So she can.
And they will. This was Texas, and they'll arrest the husband as well.
Because you know, people might not be, you know, taking road trips because they can't fly while they're pregnant, so they're just driving to visit their family. I mean, there's a lot of assumption happening there.
Yeah, but this is like The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, the Canadian writer.
So I just wanted to. You know, I don't know, like, to put a bow on this is really disturbing, but
it is
you know, you can't both sides this. Like, blue states have not gone too far, and red states are have gone insane. And you know, I apologize to anybody out there who thinks, oh, well, you know, I'm being extremist in some, or highly partisan in some way, but this is not stuff that should be up to politicians. You know, this is an extremely private matter, and at one time, you know, having the government not interfere with your life was a highly conservative value, and it doesn't seem to be that anymore. But I'm going to quote Pete Buttigieg, who, as usual, comes up with a brilliant way to describe all this. I don't know if everybody here has heard this quote before, but just give me a second to read it to you, because he was being interviewed by Chris Wallace, and Chris Wallace had given him the sort of hypothetical of late trimester abortions, and Buttigieg had said, you know, I don't want to talk about this like hypothetically, and he said, well, this is not a hypothetical. This happens with more than 6,000 women a year get third trimester abortions. And Buttigieg said, yeah, that's right, but it's 1% of cases. So let's put yourself in the shoes of the woman in that situation. If it's that late in your pregnancy, then almost by definition, you've been expecting to carry it to term. We're talking about women who have perhaps chosen a name, women who have purchased a crib. Families then get the most devastating medical news of their lifetime, something about the health or the life of the mother, or the viability of the pregnancy, that forces them to make an impossible, unthinkable choice. And the bottom line is, as horrible as that choice is, that woman, that family may seek spiritual guidance, they may seek medical guidance, but that decision is not going to be made any better, medically or morally, because the government is dictating how that decision should be made. End quote.
Yep. I think that really does sum it up very well.
Mm-hmm.
These are tough decisions, and it can't be because of politics. And again, I guess my surprise with the thing in Alabama was that was the Supreme Court. I haven't even figured out yet how they even got involved. You know, what was it that got them involved? Usually Supreme Courts just don't pick on something and say, oh yeah, we're gonna rule on something. Usually something is, like all Supreme Courts, whether something's constitutionally acceptable or not. But when I was
there's a couple involved, yeah. I mean, it was a lawsuit. Yeah, it got escalated all the way up to the Supreme Court. Of course, in New York, the Supreme Court is the lowest court. But in Alabama, the Supreme Court is the highest court.
Well, same thing in South Carolina.
Had just had that that up there, what the ruling was.
I mean,
there was a lawsuit.
I mean, are we moving toward a theocracy?
Moving toward?
Yeah, well, yeah.
I mean,
I'm giving us Priscilla, I'm giving us a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here. We could move a lot farther toward. I don't think the majority of Americans are theocrats. I think it's a very small minority. The problem is that it's the old adage: the squeaky wheel gets the grease. They're the ones that talk the loudest and talk the most. Those are the ones that you hear.
Well, I think one of the challenges in particular with American politics is historically, America's never really fully settled on its relationship to its choice religion. So while the founding fathers did write this whole concept of like separation of church and state, and some folks are like, hey, separation of church and state, that's never really been properly enforced. Just because of the way our country was founded on principles of religious freedom. Like if we were just, colonizers out for gold, no, I was going to say maybe we wouldn't have developed that way, but no, look at all of South America. No, it would have happened. But, I think it's a very real thing that we haven't reckoned with. I think on census statistics, it's very safe to say it's, the largest majority of Americans do not subscribe to some sort of religious persuasion that would lead them into a theocracy. However, it's so embedded in the American narrative that I don't even know if people can properly differentiate religion from politics.
Oh, that's true. And you're right. I mean, it's supposed to be separation of church and state. However, every office holder takes the oath on the Bible. Every one of them. The Senate and the House of Representatives have their pastors, and those pastors come in and have an invocation before the start of most of the sessions there. So they're really, when we're talking about church and state, it's a little tough. Now, can you imagine if a president of the United States, once again, took the oath and took it on the Quran? They would lose their minds. Or took it on the Torah. They would lose their minds.
If we can even get folks of those religious persuasions elected, which I think is the other part of the problem. I think that the country leans toward very specific demographics in their president, and it's usually somebody who resonates with white Christian values. Barack Obama was a bit of an anomaly, but Barack Obama knew how to get the support of the right people to vote. But, for them, and then in Trump again is another anomaly, but looking at all of the previous presidents, they fit a very specific trope. And you're looking at the candidates who didn't, for various reasons. They were women. They gave off vibes of being not Christian. They, these folks who don't get elected, they don't meet it. Even if they're the nicest, sweetest, most sane people, they just don't meet the trope of the white Christian male leader.
So that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this week's episode, the Phoenix Research Group, an independent research consortium offering social issue solutions to NGOs and international government agencies through multidisciplinary, nonpartisan, and unbiased research. We'd also like to thank our podcast partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Podkite, who does all our analytics, iHeartRadio, where people get their music and podcasts, Apple iTunes, the largest source of music and podcasts on the internet, Spotify, the most popular source for the Nova Society. The Nova Society is available on all these and other quality platforms mentioned in our description. We'd like to thank our listeners. Without you, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a comment, a question, or would like to be a guest on the Nova Society, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. Always remember, the power of society is knowledge. So for Dr. Scott Gershwer, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Be well, and we hope to see you again next time.